All right, moving along. The NFC South, we start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Added Jordan Whitehead, but mainly, more importantly than anything, brought back a bunch of guys. They bring back Devin White, Mike Evans. No, excuse me, they lose Devin White. I'm sorry. They bring back Antoine Winfield Jr., bring back Levante David, bring back Mike Evans, and bring back Baker Mayfield. What do you give the Bucs here, Breach, in terms of a grade for basically trying to run back the NFC South champions from the last couple of years?
Yeah, I'm going to give them a B. I mean, as you said, they're trying to run it back. But look, you didn't win a playoff game last year. You're bringing back the exact same team.
Yeah, they did. They beat the Eagles.
They did beat the Eagles. That's right. Okay, well, you're bringing back the same exact team. That it's not like they ran away with the NFC South. So if they had gone 12-5 and finished 3 games ahead of everyone, that's one thing. But they went 9-8. And so I'm not sure I'm bringing back the same exact team that went 9-8. I just don't feel like they did a lot of upgrading. And I'm not going to be picking the Buccaneers to win the Super Bowl. So I'll give them a B.
I'll give them a B+. I'll be a slightly more kind to them just because the alternative for Tampa Bay is worst team in the league. We're stripping this whole thing down. And from a 2024 standpoint, they're clearly better here. And had it not been for another team in this division who is going to hit it out of the park when we give out those grades, they are going to be respectable in that division. I mean, they could very easily still win the NFC South. As much as Atlanta has been, the darling of this free agency period, I still think that there's a world where Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, and Antoine Winfield and that core could still make some noise in that division, even though, again, it's not the most competitive in the league.
Yeah, I give it a B+. I think mainly because, one, there was all these guys, with the exception of Antoine Winfield Jr., were basically allowed to hit free agency of some form or fashion. They tagged Winfield Jr., but they brought these guys back and because of this culture that they wanted to come back to, and they are running it back. And I think once again, they're not going to be the favorite. The Falcons are going to be the favorite to win the division. We'll talk about them in a second, but the Bucs can easily win the division. I do agree with Breach, in the sense in what you were trying to say, Breach. I know they did win the playoff game, but the Eagles were collapsing, and it's like this, but they could have, frankly, they could have gone to the NFC title game fairly easily. Maybe, who knows, won the NFC, but it's like it just doesn't feel like that compelling. But I think we do underrate them a little bit. So I'll say even B. Actually, the Saints lose Michael Thomas, lose Jameis Winston, re-up Tyrann. I don't have my soundboard with me. Tyrann Mathieu, and also bring in Demario Davis, Willie Gay Jr., and Cedric Wilson Jr. I don't know, man. I'll say C for the Saints. I'm consistently underwhelmed by the New Orleans Saints and just where they're at, Sully.
Yeah, it's just kind of a meh free agency cycle for them. C's probably fine. I'd probably go C- because I don't know if they're how about this? By everybody else in that free agency period, they're now worse in the division, right? Like Atlanta's jumped them. And their linebackers I like Willie Gay Jr., I like Demario Davis, their linebackers will be fine, but I just don't know if they've done anything to the level of either retaining your stars from a year ago, like Baker Mayfield, these real movers and shakers, or going out and swinging for the fences like Atlanta. They just kind of seem like a team that's meh, that's always weirdly $100,000 million under the cap. They have to restructure 45 people. It just seems like they have more work to do than any other team to get cap compliant. It just seems very difficult for them leading up to the start of the league new year. So I don't know. It just feels a little bit meh for this team so far.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a C. I mean, look, they signed Nathan Peterman. Does that count for anything?
No.
No, sure doesn't.
Okay, then I'm going to go with the C.
Yeah, I mean, it is so blah. The Atlanta Falcons, the opposite of blah. They go get Kirk Cousins on a huge deal, then sign Darnell Mooney to 3 years, $39 million, trade for Rondell Moore. They obviously traded away Desmond Ridder in that spot, and they re-signed a few guys of their own. Look, Atlanta felt like they were a quarterback away, and they went and got the quarterback. Now, he's got to be healthy. He's got to play well, but they have a good offensive line. They have a great offensive coordinator in Zach Robinson, I think. And they have all these pieces in place, all these three guys they drafted in the top 10 over the last 3 years on offense, where you can like this team is a Super Bowl contender. I know Kirk Cousins didn't have playoff like success, but I mean this team should be the favorite in the division. And if they have enough there where if Raheem Morris's defense is good, they can make a run in the Lombardi. They're at least a playoff team, I think, or a playoff contender for sure. No one would disagree with that. Give them an A+.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't give them an A+, right? I mean, like, they're the team that was making all of the great moves this offseason. Kirk Cousins, clearly, I mean, that's obvious. You immediately upgraded your best quarterback that you've had since Matt Ryan. It's night and day from what you had a year ago. Hopefully, that makes your first-round draft picks of the last few years, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, all kind of elevate to what you hoped they would be, what they would become. But to me, I love the Darnell Mooney one. Kirk Cousins, obviously. Darnell Mooney, I think, is so underrated. The dude's like in his mid-20s, has a 1,000-yard season, and was on one of the worst passing teams in football over the last few years. Now you give him an offense where there's a ton of other weapons that the secondary has to occupy, and you have an elevated quarterback playing Kirk Cousins. I think you can get right back to a 1,000-yard season, and we'll look at that as one of the sneaky best signings of the offseason.
And I can't believe they got compensation for Desmond Ridder. You look at all the other teams. We're talking about Mac Jones only going for a 6th-round pick. Justin Fields going for a 6th-round pick. The Falcons got someone who might actually be productive in their offense in Rondale Moore. When you're talking about being a third receiver behind Darnell Mooney and Drake London, he could put up some decent numbers. I mostly agree with you guys. I'm not going to go full A+. I'm just going with the regular A. No plus. Obviously, Kirk Cousins coming off. You're putting all your eggs in the Kirk Cousins basket, which is fine, except that he's coming off a torn Achilles. So that is my one tiny minor concern that knocks me from the A+ down to the A.
I think it's a perfectly reasonable concern. I got the same concerns. I just think we've seen enough from these quarterbacks in the modern era where they can bounce back from injury. And I think Cousins, for what they stated that they wanted out of a quarterback and for what they got, they would have got the best guy available, who really the only I think Kirk Cousins is adamant about two things. Like, he wants to have a good fit culture-wise, I think he wants to have a good fit financially. And the Falcons were able to offer that to him. And I don't think he was leaving Minnesota unless there was a really good fit culture-wise out there for him. And I think the Falcons provided that, which I think that's impressive, man, to convince somebody like that to bounce. All right. The Carolina Panthers. So they traded Brian Burns, which, again, I've talked about this at length. I don't think it's a bad thing to trade Brian Burns. You should have traded him 18 months ago. You didn't get a great haul in return because you would like to get a first-rounder, but it's better than having to play out the season and watch him leave for compensatory third when there's no chance really in hell that this team is going to be hyper. Like, maybe they turn things around in year one with Dave Canales. I don't think they're going to magically do it. I think the ceiling is probably like 8 wins, and that's being really generous. Wasting Brian Burns for 8 wins, you get something in return. You add Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis. You make the trade and pick up Deontay Johnson, which I really like. You lose, of course, Dante Jackson in that trade. Josie Jewell, all right. Caleb on Chason, former first-round pick, pass rusher who's just sort of been a guy. And Sean Robinson, you really improved the defensive line. And the Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis signings, I think, really underrated in terms of improving the interior of that offensive line. I want to give the Panthers a B, and I'm really doing the same thing we talked about with Fields, Sully, where I'm getting hung up on the compensation you got back from Brian Burns here.
Yeah, no, I think again, it's fair. You can't ignore it. I think that you try not to have it be the sole reason why you do something. But for the Carolina Panthers, and I would probably give them a C+, B-, just because I don't know if there's anything super seismic that they've made to improve this team. But I will say I do like that they're solidifying the offensive line. I do like that they brought in Deontay Johnson, as you said, because I think we mentioned it last week. Like, okay, fine, 8 wins is the bar, is the ceiling for this team to be as successful, as high as they possibly could go in 2024. The only real barometer of success for the Panthers is if Bryce Young is good next year. That's really it. So if you're putting a sturdy offensive line and giving him somebody to throw to, you're at least giving your number 1 overall pick a fighting chance. And if he shows any sort of promise, well, then you can go into next offseason a little bit more confident than you are this year, where you're like, oh boy, I don't know if he's the guy. We might have some problems here. So really, it's all about Bryce Young and interior of the offensive line. Check. Wide receiver, check. Those are two good things.
Yeah, I'm going to give him a C. I just think that giving away your best pass rusher for not a lot isn't a great look. Even if you are throwing, even if you're giving up on next season, it was.
Well, when you put it that way,
yeah, that's enough to turn. And like, I understand what Sully's saying, that it is all about Bryce Young and what he looks like. But even with the Deontay Johnson trade, their best receivers, best two are still Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen right now. I mean, that's still not a great receiving duo. So I am still not sold at all on the Panthers.